Hello and welcome to this first look exploring session, and we're beginning our journey into the world of Sir William Alexander, 1st Earl of Stirling, who wrote 4 plays. Read 'em and weep. 4 plays, the monarchic tragedies, and we are starting with a Croesus. I don't know precisely the order that you should be reading them in terms of dates of writing. There's a slightly different order to the order that they get. They're arranged in publication, so I'm slightly unsure whether we should be reading this one first, but I think the slightly earlier one is Darius, whereas this is one from around 1604, yes, it's an interesting journey of a playwright I know almost nothing about, which has been nominated for us to do by one of our lovely patrons. Thank you very much for nominating this play. If you're a patron, you can suggest things that we are going to work on and push and persuade us to do it, because you're our supporters, and therefore we try to listen and be responsive. It only took us about 6 to 12, maybe 18 months to actually get round to sorting out the text. It was quite a fiddly one, but we got there in the end. Without further ado, we're going to dive into the first couple of acts of Croesus and reading Solon, and a chorus in Act 2 is...
I am Greg, and I'm really glad I've been practicing my breathing.
Reading Aesop and Adrastus is...
Liza Graham in London. This is the King Darius guy?
Different Darius. Different King Darius. Different King Darius. Do not bring up... This is not it's the for those regulars who wonder, yes, there is another earlier play about King Darius.
Don't read it!
It's a great play. I think it's one of the greatest works of literature ever produced.
Do read it!
It's weird. It's a weird play. Whereas King Darius by William Alexander we have not done yet, so we have no idea what that is like. Anyway, reading the chorus in Act 1 and Croesus himself is...
Rachael, actor on the East Coast.
And I'm your host, Robert Crighton. I would be reading stage directions, but there are almost no stage directions. This is in the neoclassical vein, and therefore is mostly about the words. So without further ado, let's dive into them. Act 1, we have the arrival of Solon Solus. And Mutidus.
I know. Switch scripts, which doesn't help. Right. Lo, how the stormy world doth worldlings toss, twixt sandy pleasures and a rocky will, whilst them that court it most doth cross, to vice indulgent, virtue's stepdame still. This mass of thoughts, this animated slime, this dying substance and this living shadow, this sport of fortune and the prey of time, soon raised, as flowers are in a meadow. He toils to get, such as his foolish nature, a constant good in his inconstant ill, an reasonable creature that makes his reason subject to his will. Whilst on the height of contemplation placed, I weigh fond earthlings' earnest, idle strife. All, though they have all diverse parts embraced, would act a comic scene of tragic life. The mind, which always at some new things aims, to get for what it longs no travel spares, and loathing what it has of better dreams, which when enjoyed doth procreate but cares. Yet to a sovereign bliss which they surmise, by divers means or pregnant wits aspire, but with strange shapes the same so much disguise, that we scarce can know, much less acquire. Some place their happiness, unhappy beasts, whose minds are drunk with momentary joys, in gorgeous garments and in dainty feasts, to pamper breath-tossed flesh with pleasure's toys. Some more austere no such delights allow, but rein their passions with advised respects, and by no fortune moved to brag nor bow, would make the world enamoured of their sex. some bathing still in virtue's purest springs, do draw ideas of a heavenly brood, and search the secrets of mysterious things as most undoubted heirs of that high good. Thus, with a dreamed delight, uncertain pain, all seek by several ways a perfect bliss, and let none wonder though they toil in vain, who cannot well discern what thing it is. What happiness can be imagined here, on painted grounds though we our hopes repose, who dearly first do gain what we hold dear, then what we once must lose, still fear to lose. Think, though on 1,000 scarcely one of all can at this point of happiness arrive, one fortune have, while so fortune thrall, to get the thing for which a world does strive. What? Though he swim in oceans of delight, have none above him and his equals rare, ears joying pleasant sounds, eyes stately sights, his treasures infinite, his buildings fair. Yet fortune's course, which cannot be controlled, must mount some mean men up, throw down the great, and still in motion circularly rolled, from what it is must alter every state. Though of his wealth the greedy man doth boast, while treasures vain his drossy wits bewitch, what hath he gained but what another lost? And once his loss may seek another rich, but all lose who seek to profit thus, to found their trust on trustless grounds whilst made. We may be robbed from them, they robbed from us, grieved for their loss, as when first purchased glad. Those are but fools who hope true rest to find in this frail world where for a while we range, which doth, like seas exposed to every wind, ebb, flow, storm, calm, still moving, still in change. Each wave we see doth drive the first away, and still its whitest foams where rocks are near, while as one grows another doth decay, the greatest danger oft doth least appear. Their seeming bliss, who trust in frothy shows, whose course with moments fickle fortune dates, as to a height so to confusion grows, a secret fate doth manage mighty states. But I scorn fortune, and was ever free from that dread wealth depending on her power. My treasure still I bear about with me, which neither time nor tyrants can devour. That lady of events, though she still rave, scarce can her course to mock my mind advance, for, if not trusted first, none can deceive, and I attend no certainty from chance. Then have I learned to moderate my mind, still with contentment crowning my desires, my garments coarse, my food such as I find, he have enough who to no more aspires. What satisfaction doth o'erflow my soul? The world all weighed, while high accounts I cast, and in my memory's unblotted scroll do match the present time with others past. Those worldly minds, whose weakness wealth doth cloak, though others happy, I of them wretched think, for whilst that passions have base or reason choke, the body's slave, their souls surcharged do sink. Yet loathe I do not the world as loathed by it, like those who, when disdained, pretend disdain. No, no, I had, as Athens must admit, what riches, birth, or reputation gain, and if that I would vaunt of mine own deeds, fair city, where mine eyes first sucked the light, I challenge might what most thy glory breeds. For fame or power, as due to me of right, when Salamina had our yoke removed, with folly's garments, wisdom to disguise, what none durst else attempt, I boldly moved, and seemed a fool to make the people wise. Then, having thus by policy prevailed, my country's squadrons leading to the field, whilst both by strength and stratagems assailed, I forced that isle, though walled with waves, to yield. But when renowned by that adventurous deed, and turned victorious, charged with stranger spoils, no perfect bliss below, worse did succeed. That peace was abroad, bred civil broils. What more violence doth fury lead than mutinous commons when they want a head? The meaner sort could not their minds conform, those things to do which great men did command. And, whilst distracted with a dangerous storm, all joined it to place the rudder in my hand, I reunited that divided state, and with good success managed matters well, with further kindled had been quenched too late, that hydra-headed tumult did so swell. When I my worth by these two works had proved, and trod the path of power as prince of space, the people's minion by the nobles lived, none could be great save such as I would grace. Thus carried with the force of fortune's stream, I absolutely acted what I would. For the democracy was but a name, the city's reins my hand in trust did hold. I might, a tyrant, still have ruled in state, but my clear mind could no such clouds conceive, but gladly left what others urge of late. If I may rule myself, no more I crave. Yet some, whose thoughts but for frail glory cared, said that my sprite could not aspire to reign, and that my error could not be repaired, since so to err means come not oft again. My soul in this some more contentment finds, than if a diadem adorned my brow. I chained the affections of undaunted minds through barbarous erst, which did to order bow, yet hardly could rich citizens advise to keep the statutes which my laws contained. Whilst one was praised, another did despise. Some loved, some loathed, even as they thought they gained. At last, at least, in show will rest content. Even those who hate me most lend their applause. A worthy mind needs never to repent the suffering crosses for an honest cause. Whilst travelling now with a contented mind, the memory of this my fancy feeds, though to great states their periods are assigned. Time cannot make a prey of virtue's deeds, where southern-mouthed Nile from a concealed source in unding over the fields no banks can bind. I saw their wonders, heard their wise discourse. Rare sights enriched mine eyes, rare lights my mind, and if it were but this, yet this delights. Behold, how Croesus here, the Lydian king, to be his guest me earnestly invites, the which to some would great contentment bring, but I bemoan that world bewitched man, who makes his gold his god, the earth his heaven. And I will try by all the means I can to make his judgment with his fortune even.
What can man's wandering thoughts confine, or satisfy his fancies all? For whilst he wonders, doth design each great things then do seem but small. What terror can his sprite appall? Whilst taking more than it can hold, he to himself contentment doth assign. His mind, which monsters breeds, imagination feeds, and with high thoughts quite headlongs rolled, whilst seeking here a perfect ease to find, would but melt mountains and embrace the wind. What wonder though the soul of man, spark of heaven that shines below, doth labor by all means it can, like to itself to show. The heavenly essence heaven would know, but from this mass, where bound till free, with pain both spend life's little span, the better part would be above, and the earth from the earth cannot remove. How can two contraries agree? Thus as the best part of the worst doth move, man of much worth or of no worth doth prove. Oh, from what fountain do proceed these humors of so many kinds? Each brain doth diverse fancies breed, as many men, as many minds, and in the world a man scarce finds another of his humor right, nor are there two so like indeed, if we remark their several graces and lineaments of both their faces, that can abide the proof of sight. If the outward forms then differ as they do, of force the affections must be different too. Passions spoil our better part. The soul is vexed with their dissensions. We make a god of our own heart and worship all our vain inventions. This brain-bred mist of apprehensions the mind doth with confusion fill, whilst reason in exile doth smart, and few are free from this infection. For all are slaves to some affection, which doth oppress the judgment still. Those partial tyrants, not directed right, even of the clearest minds, eclipse the light. 1,000 times, O happy he, who doth his passions so subdue, that he may with clear reason's eye their imperfections fountains view, that so he may himself renew, who to his thoughts prescribing laws might set his soul from bondage free, and never from bright reason swerve, but making passions it to serve, would weigh each thing as there were cause. O greater were the monarch of the mind, than if he might command from thole to in-day.
And thus we conclude Act 1. So we've heard from Solon, goodwill ambassador, for his mission now to Croesus. There's some really interesting stuff coming out here. I mean, from this lengthy discourse on his way of life, that you don't want to be ruled by stuff and pleasures and things, and let's pull it back. Let's and the choruses reiterate some of those thoughts about subdue your passions, suppress. And thoughts from the room about this. I've got lots of interesting little notes, but I want to see what the room's feeling. Greg, that was a massive thing there to open with. But yeah, it's interesting. How are you finding Solon?
Yeah, that was a heck of a speech. I'm not entirely certain of what all I was saying. I know what I was saying in words, but I didn't. I was too taken up in not tripping up too many times. It was interesting. This is something that's just being discussed in the chat. I'm curious to see whether the word tyrant is being used in the more modern sense of the word as being somebody evil, or in the ancient Athenian sense of the word, which was much more about somebody who took over as a leader who would overturn the existing regime. So it was more of it wasn't quite the same meaning as it does nowadays.
Yes, I might, a tyrant, still have ruled in state. So it's this thing of, and it's an important distinction because, of course, it's that question. I might, he might have remained a tyrant. He could have, he reunited a kingdom. But what does he actually want to do?
If Solon wasn't a great ruler, I mean, he was, and I'm more Rome than Greece, but he wasn't a nice man, from what I remember.
Well, it's the question of the play world. What is the play world doing with this figure?
It's an interesting prologue. And actually, I love the fact that it takes him 3.5 pages to finally get to the plot of the play.
Yes, you always put that plot point at the very end of the speech. We had this actually this afternoon as well. So yeah, he suddenly gets around to I renounce worldly goods, but Croesus, boy. Oh, whoo, stuff. Rachael.
Just how much of it, so much. This is all like to the fourth wall, to the audience. I mean, I don't know what I mean. I don't know what I mean by that, but I feel like this is it's saying something different than usually in plays, that this is, I don't know, the fourth wall is just so much more permeable because that entire first part is just to them, that we begin without any conversation, that this is really, they're really going for the audience, and not physically grabbing them, but they are really trying to grab them in.
Though we have also the clues to its sort of literary roots as well. We have this in the opening speech, this repeated homophone, raised and raised, which, in performance, I don't think there's any way of getting that across without actions.
Gesture.
I meant to ask, how the do you get those two differentiated?
Yeah.
Because it tripped me up, and I not thought, do you raised, but.
I'd say I suspect that's its literary nature as well. There, that that's the kind of thing that you can only get by reading it, and actually reading it aloud. That doesn't work. And that's a question as to the nature of this text. Is it more literary in nature, or is it more performy? And what do we want to do with it on those lines? Rachael again.
It's back to just what I said before, but I wonder if, because that fourth wall is so permeable, and I think this is what I wanted to say, that if this is meant to really be like a thinly veiled criticism of someone or something, and they're trying to drive that point home, or if I'm just completely missing that, and this is just something, weird that they've done, but it's just, I don't know. I don't feel like I've ever realized that before with the other plays that we've done, or it's not been done as blatantly and full on foot on the gas as that one just was.
Liza, do you have any thoughts?
Well, yes, I'm quite liking the verse. I like the various metaphorical images of man, or of the human, this mass of thoughts, this animated slime, this dying substance, and this living shadow, the sport of fortune and the prey of time. Yeah, I mean, what a cosmic description of what it is to be a person. Bit goth as well, and I like things that are goth.
The slime, as in sort of like earth and
primordial slime.
Yeah, we haven't had that since John Bale. God's promises.
Mud. Slime was often used to be mud.
Mud. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I cut you off. Going on my John Bale slime tangent.
Yes, very, very slimy, John Bale. So yeah, I like the verse. The ABAB makes it feel kind of contemplative, and then we go into the chorus, which is in tetrameter, and we stay. It looks like we stay with the ABAB. Let's see. Let me count it off. ABAB B C D D. No. Anyway, there's a scheme. I like the scheme. We're looking at a text without stanza breaks, which makes it harder to count off. But yeah, I like the scheme. Shut up now.
Yeah, no, that's cool. We have a scheme. And yeah, Act 1 is acting like a prologue to a degree. It's setting up themes. There may be wider political themes going on here. We're referencing an island. A divided state in the early years of James I. I don't know if that's relevant at all. Maybe it is. Maybe it's not. So that's something that may be coming into play. Anyway, let's get to some dialogue. We've had people speechifying. Let's dive into Act 2. And in Scene 1, we will have 3 people speaking. I don't know when they all enter. Because we have no indications, but we know that in the scene coming up, Act 2, Scene 1, we will have Croesus, Aesop, and Solon.
What prince hath been so favoured by the fates, as could like me of full contentment boasts? Loved of mine own, and feared of foreign states, my foes have fame, my friends were never crossed. For having that which thousands seek at will, my happiness in all things hath been such, heaven's favourite, and fortune's minion still. I know not what to wish, I have so much. Mine eyes no way did ever grieve my heart with any object that their sight did draw. My name applauded in My name applauded is in every part, my word an oracle, my will a law. What breast can well confine this flood of joys, whose swelling current doth o'erflow my mind, which never dreamed that which the soul annoys, but did in all a satisfaction find. I scorn vain shadows of conceited fears, as one whose state is built on marble grounds. In all my horoscope no cloud appears, my bliss abounds, my pleasures pass all bounds.
That Grecian, sir, is at the court arrived, whose wisdom fame through all the world records.
And to extol my state have you not strived, whilst bent to soothe his ears with courteous words?
In all the parts where he hath chanced to be, in foreign bounds, or where he first saw light, he never did such stately wonders see, as since this court enriched hath his sight. When regal shows had ravished first his eye, as mountains' nurslings, little simple swains, who used with infant floods, them never spy, sport portative like serpents through the plains. When one of them first comes to view the vales, and wanton water nymphs their wondering seas, the rareness of the sight so much prevails, that rillets rivers seem, the rivers seas. So all the guards that garnished Solon's way did to his mind a great amazement bring. The gallants' golden statues made him stay. Each groom a prince, each esquire seemed a king. And now he comes to gain your longed-for sight, whom in his mind no doubt he doth adore. He gazed on those who held of you their light. Son of this soil, he must admire you more. Now he o'er all will spread your praises forth, a famous witness of your glorious reign. The record of one wise man is more worth than what a world of others would maintain.
Great prince, do not the loving zeal reject, which a vain man yet a good mind affords, and who perchance doth more your good effect than those who paint their love with fairer words?
Love, sage Grecian, grateful is to us, whom fame long since acquainted with thy worth, so that we long longed for thy presence thus, to spy the spring which sent such treasures forth. Would God that many such would here resort, whose virtues' beams would shine in every breast, whose countenance grave would grace so great a court, and like a lamp give light unto the rest.
Spare, courteous king, that undeserved praise. I am but one who do the world despise, and would my thoughts to some perfection rise. A wisdom lover, willing to be wise. And yet all that I have learned, huge toils now past, by long experience and in famous schools, is but to know my ignorance at last. Who thinks themselves most wise are greater fools.
This is the nature of a noble mind. It rather would be good than be so thought, as if it had no aim but fame to find, such as the shadow, not the substance sought, yet forced to give that which thou wilt not take. The world, what thou hold'st down, doth raise more high. That which thy face thus shuns shines on thy back. Praise follows them who what they merit fly. And now I think, on the earth no creature lives who better can instruct what I would learn than thou, to whom frank nature largely gives a mind to see, a judgment to discern.
To satisfy your suit, my duteous care shall it, or then my ignorance disclose.
Lo, you have seen my pomp, my treasures rare, and all the strength on which my thoughts repose.
Oh, those be but dreams of bliss which fortune brings to break, by bending, foolish mortals' minds. I saw but senseless heaps of melting things, a waving wealth exposed to many winds. This is but the body serving to decor, as foolish owners it the owners spends, where minds more circumspect seek better store of wealth from danger free that never ends.
Wot not what you mean. Whilst thus in love, with feigned ideas of imagined bliss, by fancies drawn, such portraits do but move sick brains to dream that which indeed they miss. But more I have than their conceits can show, whose rich conjectures breed but poor effects. And I beseech you, did you ever know a man more blessed than I in all respects?
Aye, tell us, you a man whom Athens loved, who to do good at no occasion failed, and in my judgment have most happy proved, since while he lived, beloved, whilst dead, bewailed. And last, that he might reap all fruits of bliss, his country's beaten bands ne'er put to flight, by him encouraged, scorned to be submiss, who died in victorious into army's sight, more glorious now than when he was alive, as he in heaven, on earth his happy rest, to trace his steps who led by virtue strive, heirs of his worth and honoured by the best.
Since this first place a private person gains, whose fortune's treasure in short time was told, now next in rank who registered remains, whose happiness you most accomplished hold.
Of Cleobis and Bittern's virtuous way, the prosperous course doth to my thoughts approach. Their mother, wanting on a solemn day the horses which were used to draw her coach, then to supply the place love kindly raised, who drew her to that place of public mirth, whilst both of them abundantly were praised, they for their piety, she for her birth. This charitable work, when brought to end, both died whilst offering incense to the gods, who favoured so to draw them did intend from further danger of affliction's rods. O happy mother, who, with true delight, of labours past such pleasant fruits enjoyed, and happy children, who did thus acquit the mother's pain, and died while still well employed. Ah, our lives are frail, do what we can, and like the brittle glass break whilst they glance, then oft the heavens, to curb the pride of man, do sour our sweets with some sad chance.
Is there no place appointed then for me? Is there no place appointed then for me? Or is my state so abject in thine eyes that thou dost think me blessed in no degree, as one whose best in fortune's balance lies? Or think'st thou me of judgment too remiss, a wretch exposed to want, to scorn, or pains, the bastard child of fortune, barred from bliss, whom heavens do hate, and all the world disdains? Are those poor creatures then to be compared with one who may consume such in his wrath, who, as I please, do punish or reward, whose words, nay, even whose looks give life or death?
Let not your judgment thus from reason shrink, to gloss on that which simply comes from me. They who do freely speak no treason think, one cannot both your friend and flatterer be. To us who Grecians are, the gods do grant a moderate measure of an humble wit, so that our country yet did never want some whom the world for wise men did admit. And yet amongst us all the greater number, whilst living, look not for a perfect rest, though fortune's minions in her bosom slumber, and seem to some whom this world blinds most blessed. Yet over all mortal states change so prevails, we alterations daily do attend, and holds this for a ground that never fails. None can be thoroughly blessed before the end. I may compare our state to table plays, whilst judges that are blind give only light. There are many doubts thy earnest mind dismays, which must have happy throws, then use them right. So all our days in doubt, what things may chance, time posts away, our breath seems it to chase. And when the occasion comes us to advance, it of 1,000 one can scarce embrace. when by a generous indignation moved to fight with danger for a doubtful praise, whilst valour blindly but by a chance is proved that one's disgrace another's fame must raise. Oh, what a fool his judgment will commit to grace the one with a not gained applause. Where fortune is but to give a sentence, yet whilst bloody agents plead a doubtful cause. This world a field is, whereas each man fights and armed with reason resolutely goes to war till death close up the body's lights, both with external and internal foes. And how can he the victor's title gain, who yet is busied with a doubtful flight? Or he be happy with who doth still remain in fortune's danger for a small delight? The winged course of man always the wind-winged course of man away fast wears, course that consists of hours of a day that gives place to night full of fears, thus everything doth change, all things decay. Those who do stand in peace may fall in strife, and have their fame by infamy suppressed. The evening crowns the day, the death the life. Many are fortunate, but few are blessed.
I see this Grecian sprite but base appears, which cannot comprehend heroic things. The world of him more than he merits hears, at least he knows not what belongs to kings. Yet fame his name so gloriously arrayed, that long I longed to have him in my house. But all my expectations are betrayed. I think a mountain hath brought forth a mouse.
And we'll pause there, as that's the end of the scene, where the king presumably exits in a huff. It's interesting. I think actually the reading did get across a sort of sense of two people circling each other at the beginning of the scene, of sort of going, where is this going? Where is this going? Where is this? Okay, I'm going to get cross now. And there is a nice element to that. I was getting, it's not quite Godzilla versus King Kong, but it has got emotion to it. Interesting things. Thoughts from the room, Rachel.
Well, we did Campaspe last week, and we had Alexander the Great in it, and this kind of reminds me of his Diogenes, him and Diogenes. It's not meant to be comedic in that way, and I didn't think the scene was comedic, but that it's just this ruler going to somebody and not hearing what he wants to hear, because this is a man who's more philosophical and not a courtier or something who's going to kiss up to him.
No, absolutely, and you're right. It's in a very different key, there's some really nice lines in there as well. I mean, it's a little opaque at times, but the sense of it is coming across, and there's some. I like the day to night, night full of fears. That's an interesting one to throw in. One cannot both be your friend and flatterer be. I mean, there's commonplaces, but there's some of them are working quite nicely. Other thoughts. Liza.
Well, I would say the basic rule applies that if you're a king in a play, never start the play with a speech about how happy you are. There's really only one way it can go from there.
Everything is lovely. Bring in the other guy.
And what Solon does quite neatly is challenge Croesus' notion of what happiness is. Say, the end of that speech, many are fortunate, but few are blessed, as in, yeah, you're fortunate right now. Things are going your way. That's just fortune. Fortune changes. So he's dropping some truth bombs, and Croesus responds with a very elegant, an 8-line disverse, going, well, you were really famous, but obviously you're not all that. See ya.
Yeah, I mean,
what an exit line.
No, a mountain hath brought forth a mouse.
Yeah.
I think that should be used. That's a definite t-shirt.
Line.
Yeah.
I liked the examples from Solon. I couldn't remember my character's name. They wanted to have me scurrying into Wikipedia because I'd never heard of Cleobus and Bitons. I was like, ooh, who are they? But yeah, I definitely got that circling feel and very much feeling like I'm at the end of it.
Because they're both really super polite at the beginning. I mean, that's the thing, is that, oh, you're sage Grecian, great prince, all this stuff. And it slowly strips away as the scene goes on. And, Aesop does the sort of bigging him up cue, And, that might not end up to have been a great move from...
I didn't feel that... I felt like I was the centre of calm in some ways. He's slimy. He's horrible Solon in that scene. I felt just like that sort of, oh, my skin's crawling from myself here. It's not nice.
Okay. Any other thoughts before we continue? Because effectively the next scene is just a continuation. Liza.
Oh, just a quick note to say, I really liked... the Alexander continues to make me happy with his use of language. That I quite liked. Do intersour our sweets with some sad chance. The verb to intersour. That's really, and it's a coinage, but you know what it means, which is really cool, I think.
Yeah, that was because it wasn't quite written like that in the script, and I was going, I'm sure that's going to have to be intersour.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where I just went, I'm just going to leave that spelling as it was, and let's see what the room says. And the room said yes, so that is cool. So we can infer from the absence in the scene directive that Croesus, having dropped the mic, has exited and leaves Solon with his warm up.
This king have put his trust in trustless toys, whilst courting only temporary things. And like a hooded hawk, gorged with vain joy, at random flies, borne forth on folly's wings. Oh, how this makes my grief exceeding great, to see one's care who lives for dead things such, while shoe-transported minds admired his state. Which I not envy, no, but pity much. Those worms of the earth, whilst low-placed thoughts prevail, love melting things whose shoe the body fits, where souls of clearer sight do never fail to value most the treasure of good wits. Those worldly things do in this world decay, or at least we leave them with our breath, where to eternity this leads the way, so differ they as far as life and death.
And yet what wonder, though he wander thus, whom still by success treacherous fortune blinds? Though this indeed seems somewhat strange to us, who have with learning purified our minds. Was he not born heir of a mighty state? And used with fortune's smiles, not feared for frowns, doth measure all things by his own conceit. A great defect which fatal is to crowns. Then from his youth, still trusting in a throne, which all that pride could crave or wealth could give, used with entreaties and controlled by none, he would the tongue of liberty deprive. though to his sight I dare not thus appear, whose partial judgment far from reason parts. I grieve to see your entertainment here so far inferior to your own deserts. That matchless wisdom which the world admires and ravished with delight amazed hears, since not in consort with his vain desires, did seem unpleasant to distempered ears. Ears which can entry give to no discourse, save that which enters fraughted with his praise. He can love none but them that love his course, and thinks all fools who use no flattering phrase. This with the great ones doth the gods displease, though spreading all her heavenly treasures forth. They, if not in their livery them to please, do virtue vilify as of no worth.
I care not, Aesop, how the king conceived those my frank words, which I must always use. I came not here till he my coming craved, and now when come will not my name abuse. Should I his poisonous sycophants resemble, whose silken words their sovereign do overthrow? I for his diadem would not dissemble what hearts do think the tongues were made to show. And what if I, his humour to content the world's opinion lost by gaining wands? He cannot but give me gifts which may be spent, but naught can clear my mind if darkened once. That so he might my reputation raise, if I soothed him, it would procure my shame. Whilst those who virtuous are virtue's praise, this in effect is but a secret blame. Though as a simple man he may me despise, yet better simple good than doubly ill. I not my worth by others prize, nor by opinions do direct my will. That praise contents me more, which one imparts of judgment sound, though of a mean degree, than praise from princes void of princely parts, who have more wealth but not more wit than he.
Who come to court must with king's faults deport.
Who come to court should truth the king's report.
A wise man at their imperfections winks.
An honest man will tell them what he thinks.
So should you lose yourself and them not save.
But for their folly I no blame would have.
By this you should their indignation find.
Yet have the warranty of a worthy mind.
It would be long ere you were thus preferred.
Then it should be the king, not I, that erred.
They garden as they love by guess.
Yet when I merit well, I care the less.
It's good to be still by the prince approved.
Better to be upright, though not loved.
But by this mean all hope of honour fails.
Yet honesty in end ever prevails.
I think they should excel for virtue rare all men in wit who unto men give laws. Kings of their kingdoms as the centres are, to which each weighty thing by nature draws. For as the mighty rivers, little streams, and all the liquid powers which rise or fall do seek in sundry parts by several seams the ocean's bosom that receives them all, it, as a steward of the tumid deeps, doth send them back by many secret veins, and as the earth hath need of moisture, keeps these humid treasures to refresh the plains. Thus are kings' breasts the depths where daily flow clear streams of knowledge with rare treasures charged, so that continually their wisdoms grow by many helps which others want enlarged. For those who have intelligence over all do commonly communicate to kings all the accidents of weight that chance to fall, which great advantage greatness to them brings. They, jealously disposed, comment on minds, and these who arts or nature's gifts enhance, whose value nowhere else a merchant finds, do come to kings as who may them advance. No doubt great love, since they supply his place, so with their charge to make their virtues even, doth give to them some supernatural grace, vice gods on earth, great lieutenants of heaven.
As you have shown, kings good occasions have to sound the deeps and mysteries of wit, and those And those who sow their stares from mine save do well deserve upon a throne to sit. But those rivers are not ever pure, though tainted channels which oft times conveyed by flattery's poison rendered are impure. Oft princes' hearts are by their ears betrayed, for impudent effronted persons dare, caught with vain words and detestable lies, whilst men of minds more pure must stand afar. The light is loathsome to diseased eyes. But with amazement this transports my mind. Some who are wise gross flattery can digest, and though they know how all men are inclined, yet please the bad and do but praise the best. Is it that such men no error can control, nor will not cross their appetite in aught, but nothing censoring everything extol? Where better wits would argue as they thought, or since the world of worth in all esteems, they never like a pregnant sprite to raise, so to have none who but to help them seems, or may pretend an interest in their praise. This self-conceit is a most dangerous shelf, where many have made shipwreck unawares. He who doth trust too much unto himself can never fail to fall in many snares. Of all men else great monarchs have most need to square their actions and to weigh their words, and with advice in all things to proceed. A faithful counsel oft great good affords. Lo, how the inferior spheres of force do bend, as the first mover doth their courses drive. The commons' customs on the prince depend, his manners are the rules by which they live. As for himself, none only is brought forth, kings for the use of many are ordained, that they should like suns clear kingdoms with their worth, whose life a pattern must be kept unstained. All virtuous princes have a spacious field to show their worth, even though in fortune's spite, where mean men must to their misfortune yield, whilst want of power out doth cloud their virtue quite. As precious stones are the ornaments of rings, the stone decors the ring the hand. So countries are conform unto their kings, the king decors the court the land. And as a drop of poison, spent alone, infected fountains doth with venom fill, so mighty states may be tainted be by one. A vicious prince is a contagious ill.
It easy is another's faults to spy and paint in the air the shadows of our minds, whilst apprehending with the inward eye a high perfection which no practice finds.
I grant those grounds which we imagine will move no charmed man, much less a prince, to disenchant himself and seek some way at reason's court his passions to convince. Ere Croesus can refrain from this his fury, he must forsake himself as one renewed, and in the lether of oblivion bury the vanities that have his soul subdued. Those his prerogatives he first must bound and be a man to be controlled. Then all his faults as in another found, an arbiter with equal eyes behold. Could he cast off this veil of fond self-love, through which each object pride too grossly spies, he would these ravenous parasites remove, vile instruments of shame that live by lies. The only means to make such people part, that he might judge more freely of his state, were to cast out the idol of his heart, which when o'erthrown he must disclaim too late, for foreign flatterers could find no access, if not that weighing his own worth too much, he first concludes to soothe himself inclined, that all their praises should of right be such. And when these hireling sycophants have found a prince whom too secure opinion makes, his noblest part they by smooth weapons wound, all spoil by pleasing them whom flattery takes. All rulers rule when such a person bears, and virtuous men the rising to prevent, but from wholesome counsel they close up his ears, to cross the better sort in all things bent.
If you at court to credit would arise, you must not seek by truth to gain renown, but sometime must applaud what you despise, and smile in show, whilst in effect you frown.
From hence in haste I will myself retire. I hate court slavery, and my freeness scorns, nor am I only one whom Croesus doth desire, since I detest what him he thinks adorns. Oh, how light fortune doth his folly flout, whilst as he glories in this his flying show. With greedy harpies hedged round about, which gape to be made rich by his overthrow. Not all the wealth that his great kingdom shows can make me from my resolution shrink, nor can the terror of a tyrant's blows enforce my tongue to speak more than I think. Nothing as much as doubts doth vex the mind, whilst anxious thoughts to fix nowhere can come. Yet every one the way to rest may find, a resolution all things doth o'ercome. And since my thoughts in innocency rest, no outward war can inward peace surprise. What can imagined be to brave a breast that doth death and poverty despise?
And they exit, and they will briefly pause. So yes, we've had a continuation of thoughts from Solon and his mighty brain. Keeps it in a jar. Yes, and some discourse with Aesop. I don't know if Aesop's fabling with him, but we shall see. I'm here all
if you put Aesop in your play and you don't let him tell any fables, what even are you doing?
What else is Aesop for? I mean, you know, this is one of the things. The stories that this play is sort of working on are, you know, that sort of blurry division between history and legend. You know, these are stories that are recounted about these figures. How true they are in terms of what we might call history are, of course, very, very, very debatable. But yeah, they've deliberately picked people who you might have heard of. Thoughts on this back and forth between Solon and Aesop here as response. Liza's trying to distract us from discourse with Cat.
I'm sorry, he was doing the "you forgot to feed me and I died" pose.
Yes, I believe Croesus does that on a daily basis. So yeah, Greg, how are you feeling about that? That's it for Solon, by the way. Not going to see, in fact, either Solon or Aesop again. They're done. You might say that this episode is over with these two acts. We don't have a chorus to conclude this act, but we'll do that in a moment. But yeah, how are we feeling about Solon and Aesop and this little plot line?
He likes to talk. Then again, everyone does in this play, but he really likes to talk, and he doesn't really seem to go anywhere. But he's one of those people that why say one word and you can say 1,000, almost. It felt like that scene. Don't trust him.
You're really down on Solon. I don't know if the play's that down on him.
No, it's not. I'm taking this from the play. I'm not talking about Solon, the actual person. I just think it's interesting he doesn't appear again, because this is really setting him up for the slimy, nasty person in the rest of the play.
Liza?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty clear that the playwright intends Solon to be a type of virtue and intends the audience to admire him for his lack of attachment to worldly things. I don't know whether that's how it comes across in practice. In practice, Solon seems to talk a lot about how virtuous he is. You know, Aesop is the realpolitik guy saying, look, you go along to get along. And Solon is like, no, I must speak the unfiltered truth, and I'm very admirable for doing that. So Solon, perhaps a type of virtue, but a really crappy party guest. Like, I'll read all his books, but I won't necessarily invite him for tea. Even portrayed by someone so nice as Greg.
Solon.
Solon, farewell, auf Wiedersehen.
Any other thoughts before we conclude the act? No. Okay, Greg changes hat to read the chorus that concludes Act 2.
Of all the creatures bred below, we must call man most miserable, who all his time is never able to purchase any true repose. His very birth may well disclose what miseries his bliss o'erthrow. For, first, when born, he cannot know or who to his state is friend or foe, nor how at first he may stand stable, but even with cries and tears doth show what dangers to do his life enclose. Whose griefs are sure, whose joys are fable. Thus still his days in dolour so he to huge perils must expose, and with vexation lives and dies with woe, not knowing whence he came nor where to go. Then whilst he holds this lowest place. Oh, how uncertain is his state, the subject of a constant fate, to figure forth inconstancy, which ever changing as we see, is still a stranger unto peace. For if man prosper but a space, with good success fondly bold, and puffed up in his own conceit, he but abuses fortune's grace. And when that with adversity his treasures end their date, and with disasters are controlled, straight he begins for grief to die, and still the top of some extreme doth hold, not suffering summer's heat, nor winter's cold. His state doth in most danger stand, whose most abounds in worldly things, and soars too high with fortune's wings, which carry up aspiring minds, to be the object of all winds. The course of such, when rightly scanned, whilst they can not themselves command, transported with an empty name, oft high unexpected ruin brings. There were examples in this land, how worldly bliss the senses blinds, from which at last oft trouble springs. He who presumes upon the same, hid poison in his pleasure finds, and sailing rashly with the winds of fame, doth oft times sink down in a sea of shame. It may be feared that our king at last, whilst he for nothing is afraid, be by prosperity betrayed. For growing thus in greatness still, and having worldly things at will, he thinks, though time should all things waste, yet his estate shall ever last, the wonder of this peopled round. And in his own conceit have said, no course of heaven his state can cast, nor to make his fortune to be ill. But if the gods a way have laid, that he must come to be uncrowned, what sudden fears his minds may fill, and in an instant utterly confound the state which stands upon so slippery ground. When such a monarch's mind is bent to follow the most unwise, who can their folly well disguise with sugared speeches, poisonous baits, the secret canker of great states, from which at first few dissent, the which at last will do repent. Then whilst they must to ruin go, when kings begin thus to despise of honest men the good intent, who to assure their sovereign seats would fain in time some help devise, and would cut off all cause of woe, yet cannot second their conceits. These dreadful comets commonly forego a king's destruction, when miscarried so.
So yes, that's how the act ended, and yeah, this chorus a little more on point. I feel, humanity, you just can't win. Transitory moments of happiness will be taken away, and also sort of almost intimating on plot terms of the king thinks everything's going to be fine, but fortune could take all away from him. I did note in the margin at the beginning, of all the creatures bred below, we must call man most miserable. And just going, cheerful chorus there. You can't win. Happiness is fleeting. Fortune's gonna do terrible things to you as it wheels round. Any thoughts additionally here, Rachael?
This chorus kind of reminds me of a dumb show because it's really contextualizing what we just saw between Solon and Aesop, and at the same time setting us up for that next scene. That this king, the last scene, it shows, what a great philosopher this man is, even if he's not a flatterer, and that this king's rejected him, because he didn't say things the way he wanted to say them, because he didn't bow to some guy's narcissistic personality. Yeah.
Cool. Any more for any more? Otherwise, we will dive into Act 3. Whereas there's, we could almost call Act 1 and 2, they're almost like foreshadowing. It's like the portents, signs and portents before the coming of shadows. At some point, we'll have the point of no return, I'm sure. So we'll go to Act 3, Scene 1. We've already heard about the Wheel of Fortune or the Wheel of Fire. Can't remember what the other season title is called. Anyway, Act 3, Scene 1, Croesus and Adrastus. So, return to Croesus and a new character. We haven't met Adrastus yet. Let's see what's going on there then.
What fancies strange with terror strike my soul, the tortured captive of distrustful fears. Huge cares, suggesting harm, my joys control, whose mind some coming cross charactered bears, and credulous suspicion, too wise, to fortify my fears, doth means invent, whilst sudden trouble doth my sprite surprise, a presage sad, which boasts some bad event. I think the soul, since an immortal brood, hath by inheritance an heavenly power, which some foreknowledge gives of ill and good, but not the means to scape a fatal hour. Though with this mortal veil, when made half blind, not well foreseeing what each time forth brings, yet it communicates unto the mind. In cloudy dreams, true, though mysterious things, imagination wonderful in force, the judgment oft foils with confusion, so that then they prove things presupposed worse. Ere time distressed, man multiplies his woe, for as the shadow seems more monstrous still, than doth the substance whence the shape it takes, so the conjecture of a threatened ill, more than itself some to be troubled makes. This alteration too seems more than strange, which suddenly so moved hath my mind. I see, more than I thought, all states may change, when heaven pursues, the earth no defense can find. My soul all pleasure is already loathing. This hath indeed so deep impression left, a dream, a fancy, froth, a shadow, nothing, hath all my mirth even in a moment reft.
Whence, mighty sovereign, can this change proceed, which doth obscure the rays of princely grace? Those who are schooled in woe may clearly read a mighty passion written in your face. And if a stranger may presume so far, what friend is false, or who are feared as foes? For I imagine in what state you are, a secret sympathy imparting woes. Two strings in diverse lutes set in accord, some say the one only touched both give a sound. Even so, souls tuned to grief the like afford, whose airy motions mutually do wound.
No doubt, it must disburden much the mind, the secretary in distress to have, who by his own another's grief can find, where glad mind is scorn what they cannot conceive. And I, Adrastus, would the cause declare, with which I so torment my soul in vain, but yet I blush to tell my foolish care, the fond illusion of a drowsy brain.
As bodies tempered are, or souls inclined, all dreams by night the imagination makes, or else the impression thoughts work in the mind, by which when wakening one most travail takes.
by sleep arrested as o'ercome by death, and by sleep arrested as o'ercome by death. In nature's bosom I embraced true rest, and in that mass where nothing moved but breath, life's faculties sleep for a time suppressed. Then whilst the sprite most powerful did remain, since least distressed by this terrestrial part.
Souls at such times their strength so strongly strain that oft their burdens as astonished start.
To rarefy the air from vapor's powers, when first Aurora rose from Tithon's bed, ere Phoebus blushing stole from Thestis' bowers, this apprehension my brain was bred. I only have 2 sons, and the one, you see, the sign of nature's indignation bears, and from his birthday dumb is dead to me, since he can give no comfort to mine ears. The other, Attis, all my life's delight, in whom the treasures of my soul are kept. I thought, vain be my thought, in the twilight, I know not whether yet I waked or slept, whilst he was sporting, void of worldly cares, and not in danger, which could threaten death. A pointed tool of iron fell unawares, and from his body banished did his breath. Whilst the pale carcass did upbraid mine eyes, the horror of the sight my sense recalled, which when I think of, yet my courage dies. Such an exceeding fear my sprite appalled. This touched my state so much, it hath me moved to match my son in marriage at this time with virtuous Callia, whom he dearly loved, that both might reap the pleasure of their prime, and if the heavens his o'erthrow have decreed, by destiny which cannot be revoked, so may we have behind some of his seed, ere in his blossom all our hopes be choked. Thus, ere his soul lodge in the lightless shade, some of his offspring may content my mind. I cannot hold him altogether dead, who leaves his image in some one behind, and though we do whatever seems the best, to disappoint those but surmise annoys, yet for all this my mind hath never rest. Some secret terror doth disturb my joys.
Ah, sir, if such a dreamed ill as this hath plunged your soul even in the depths of grief, unhappy I, who wail a thing that is, whilst hope, though racked, dare promise no relief. Though all those dreadful fancies took effect, which heavy chance the almighty love withhold, none can compare them, no, in no respect, which with those misfortunes which my state enfold. For though your son die by another's hand, you shall but wail his death, and not your crime. The heavens of me my brother's blood demand. His fate, my fault, mourn must I all my time.
In what strange form could this disaster fall, from which there flow salt floods of just distress? Tell on at length the fatal cause of all. A greater grief makes one forget the less.
My sorrow's ground I smother it till now as to offensive food for dainty ears. But since of such discourse you do allow, I'll tell a tale that may move stones to tears. Of Phrygian princes my great father come had in my growing age a tender care, that all my education might become one whom he might for mighty hopes prepare. And yet 4 lustres scarcely had begun to grace my witnessed sex with blooming cheeks, when I, fond youth, that labyrinth could not shun, whence back in vain the straying enterer seeks. I loved, oh fatal love, unlovely fate, the virtuously fair yet fairest dame that ever was enshrined in soul's conceit, or ditties gave to grace the sounds of fame. Straight were my fancies to her beauties tied, none can paint passions but in feeling minds. I burned, freezed, doubted, hoped, despaired, lived, died, with actions changed, as oft as autumn's winds. Yet many conflicts passed twixt hopes and fears, to feast, at least to nurse my starved desires. She granted had a truce unto my tears, and temper did with equal flames my fires. For as she was the most esteemed saint, whose image love erected in my mind, so when her ears had harboured once my plaint, it pity first, and then did favour find. But triumphing in my own conceit, as one whose love his lady did prefer, I was co-rivalled, O disastrous fate, by one who loved, but was not loved by her. He, looking as I looked, saw what I saw nature's wonder, and the world's delight, and straight as that blind god, blind guide, did draw, still like a lizard, lived upon her sight. Then laboured he that jewel straight to one, whose matchless worth he prized above his breath, and loathed all light which flowed not from that sun, as life without her had been worse than death. Yea, fortune seemed to favour his desire, and where to build high hopes did give him grounds. The nymph, her parents, daily did require that she might furnish physic for his wounds. Of my distracted thoughts, strange was the strife. Who threatened thus with eminent mishap was like to lose a thing more dear than life, whilst others strived my treasure to entrap. The man who sought my joys to undermine, I could not justly wish his state or throne, nor blame the sprite that sympathized with mine. I envied not his lot, but wailed mine own. Now in my breast a mighty rage did reign, which forced my soul with inward wounds to bleed. Some fancies feared what once his love might gain, since it was possible that he might speed. Then others called her constancy to mind, which would not yield by such assaults, though proved. Yet forced to fear the frailty of her kind, a hearing woman may in time be moved. Thus tossed with doubts amidst a deep of woe, which with suspicion did my joys supplant, I blamed the thoughts that durst accuse her so. As virtue's pattern could one virtue want. And for I hoped his toils no further wrought, affliction oft affection doth inflame, she of her sex, who was the wonder thought, would not thus wrong the glory of her name. Though in my absence they had oft essayed that from her mind they might have me removed, the sun burns hottest where his beams are stayed, the more they crossed her love, the more she loved. For finding that delay no end affords, and how fair generals only flowed from art, she did upbraid him with disdainful words to raise those hopes which had abused his heart. Love is a joy which upon pain depends, a drop of sweet drowned in a sea of sours. What folly doth begin oft fury ends. They hate forever who have loved for hours. When all his arguments proved of no force, straight with disdain his soul in secret burned, and what he thought was ill to make far worse, that apostate to fury favour turned. Through love preposterous procreating hate, his thoughts amongst themselves could not agree, whilst what was best he deeply did debate, to see her dead, or then enjoyed by me. What, said he, when he first had mused a space, so hard it is to quench affection's fires, shall I disfigure that angelic face, and cloud those beauties which the world admires? Shall she by me be to confusion brought, to whom I vows and prayers did impart, to whom I sacrificed each secret thought, and on her beauty's altar burned my heart? Or shall I see her in another's power, and in his bosom laid upbraid my loss, whilst both with scornful smiles, then death more sour, to point me out for sport, report my cross? That sight, which sometimes did me sweetly charm, should it become a cause of grief to me? No, none who lives shall glory in my harm, since she will not be mine, she shall not be. The hateful lover, having vowed her death, did with a cup of poison drown my joys. The fairest body from the sweetest breath was parted thus. O ocean of a noise, that monster fame, whose many mouths and ears must know, but not conceal a rare thing wrong, and prodigal of ill most chiefly bears the worst news first, informed me of this wrong. For neighbouring near the most unhappy part, that had been spoiled of such a noble guest, As death had hers, the Furies seized my heart, whose pain did spring from that which bred her rest. How huge a weight did first confound my soul, no tongue can tell. It still my mind torments. Rage did of grief the outward signs control. When great winds blow the fire, the smoke worst vents. Whilst generous fury did disguise my grief, I ran, transported with a mighty rage, bent by revenge or death to get relief. A tragic actor for a bloody stage. For I was come no sooner to the place whereas I thought the murderer to have found, but I did meet, oh, ruin and disgrace, too dear a friend to catch an enemy's wound. Ah, passions dimmed mine eyes, wrath led my hand, I was no more myself, grief had me killed. The first by night who did before me stand, as one whose breast with rage Alecto filled. By chance encountering ere he spoke a word, I bathed his bosom with a crimson flood, and in his breast did drown the cruel sword, that in another's body drank my blood. But when a torch had partly robbed the night, proud of supposed revenge, a bitter gain, I saw, I knew, black knowledge, cruel sight. My brother was the man whom I had slain. O bitter loss which nothing can repair! My soul with two such monstrous deeds, annoyed, grief, rage, spite, shame, amazement, and despair, galled, tossed, burned, dashed, astonished, and destroyed. The thought of my offence doth grieve me most. Yet am I sometimes by love's verdict cleansed, and straight my brother's violated ghost by dreadful dreams doth brag to be revenged.
Now, whilst this great disaster did occur, what had the author of your anguish done?
He, having heard this lamentable stir, which self-accusing thoughts convicted, soon straight, wounded by a wonderful remorse, led by mad love or desperate fear to death, he bent to follow her, or dreading worse, stabbed by himself, died to defraud my wrath.
Those strange mishaps your enemies' eyes must weet, and force compassion from your greatest foe, since many monstrous circumstances meet to make a horrid harmony and woe. But what doth touch one's self must force doth find, for ills when felt than heard, grief more abounds. This ecstasy hath so o'erwhelmed my mind, a melancholy huge all mirth confounds. Yet such disasters past we must omit, at least no more immoderately lament. And as for those which are but coming yet, use ordinary means them to prevent.
No wonder, sir, though by all means you strive from dangerous actions Attis to restrain.
I will unto his youth attendance give, which in my age may guerdoned be again, if it be possible for mortal states to strive against the stars and be more strong. I fortune must unarm and cross the fates by barring both all means to do me wrong. I have commanded under pain of death that no such weapon be within my walls, as I supposed extinguish might his breath to scape a storm which oft by fortune falls. He too frequent the fields must oft defer, and without guards his lodging never leave. Though where with countrymen he doth confer, we will go try what they of him would have.
And there we will pause, as at a late edition we sort of return to Plotland after what was quite a set piece divertissement there from Adrastus. I was joking in the chat. You call that misfortune? This is misfortune.
You call that a long speech?
Yeah.
This is a speech.
This, and isn't it? I absolutely loved that speech. I thought that was just in isolation as just a separate thing. I really like this scene. It's I don't know how important that is going to be later on. Adrastus does return, so I don't think it's a complete tangent. But no, it's just as an just going. That's just a horrible story. It's just absolutely horrible. And yeah, really, there's some really nice things. We got the sweet and sour thing again. So Alexander has repeated himself, but you can't have it all. Rachael.
I mean, there's so much stoicism, not in this scene, but I think like in this play. And this is such a contrast from the last scene, and it's just going in the direction that the chorus kind of said it would. That he's not he listens to flatterers, and this is a flatterer in a certain way, that he's sympathizing with this man's dream, and that he's going to defy fate and he's going to defy the gods, which has never worked for anybody in any Greek tragedy ever. And he's encouraging him to do that in a way. And he tells him about all the tragedy that he's brought. And he says, you know what, that's a great idea. We'll avoid that by just putting more guards and making sure my son can never leave or ever have any freedom, and we'll imprison him in a tower or something.
Because again, we've had no examples of that failing in any of the plays we've done either. And no pointy things, basically. The dreams had a very specific pointy thing in mind, so let's not have any pointy things about. So, they're banned. Ban on pointy things.
It's a bit like Sleeping Beauty, isn't it? Where
just slightly bigger. So Croesus has this dream, and he's got two sons, it's this interesting sort of flow of, the first act was all about he's really happy, but people are saying, look, careful about that, and then we go into Act 3 and suddenly he's being stricken by supernatural forces. And also by some downers in his court, frankly. But this Rachel's point about luxuriating in emotion, as opposed to sort of this stoical, I don't care, I will speak the truth because I am right, kind of attitude. It really is. It's so different. Other thoughts. Liza.
Well, it seems that this play is sort of delving into what can make you happy, what can make you sad, what is real happiness, what is abiding happiness. And Solon clearly thinks that it's wisdom. And he's probably right. Because Croesus has material things and fortunate circumstances that make him happy. He has two sons. We rather disturbingly learn that he considers one to be dead to him, because that son was born without the power of speech, which, ableism, dude. You could at least teach the son to read and write and become a philosopher. Philosophy seems to be a pretty good career in a play like this. At least it seems to carry a decreased risk of death.
Yeah.
But so he's made happy by things which Solon insists are not real or abiding. And now in his second scene, he's made sad by things which he's made sad by things which are not real. He's made sad by, to be fair, any of us would be sad with a dream about a close and beloved family member dying a horrible death. But we would wake up and we would realize that it wasn't real. That's the wisdom of Solon there. We have to use our philosophical powers. But of course we're in a play where everything foreshadows something. Rachael, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, how his emotions, I think, for the logic of the time, make him so contradictory. You know, I mean, his station as a king, and you know, he says he's going to defy the gods, but he believes in dreams as like portentous, you know, dreams of the future. You know, so it's like there's some like logical contradiction there, you know, because wouldn't it be like a god like Apollo or something, or some prophecy thing giving him these dreams and playing into, yeah. And then just something about materialism and stoicism is that he doesn't let anything go, and I think he's going to crush everything that he loves for not letting any of it go.
Yeah, just to pick up on mentioning gods, you know, the within the play world, we're not really getting that many. You know, we're getting references to fortune, but we're not really getting a sense of the religious world that they're actually living in. It's sort of presumably inferred that they're all pagan, but they're quietly sort of not talking about it, which I find quite interesting. Which, in a sense, is also quite useful, because that's one of those distancing things that, you know, an audience can have. You start throwing gods at and stories of gods at an audience, and they're going, "Hang on, did I have to read up before I turned up?" All you need to know about is fortune, and that's fine. So that seems to work quite well. Yeah, I'd say I just want to go. It's Liza.
Oh, sorry. Finish your thought there.
No. Carry on.
Okay. Well, we have the whole thing about ruling one's passions. You know, Croesus spends at the top of the first scene, talks about a happiness which borders on hubris, which sets up for the knowledgeable audience which way this play is going to go. But then he also can't seem to rule his fear, and he's going to, as Rachael pointed out, take extraordinary measures and affect the life of his son in extraordinary ways. So, yeah, I suppose it's about whether you are a king over your emotions, as, you know, many kings in early modern plays are not.
Yeah. Some secret terror doth disturb my joys. He will not find rest. And, you know, if he's not sleeping, maybe he's not feeling entirely rational either. I know that one. I just want to go back to that whole Adrastus story. I do think there's some really nice work in this that I'm really enjoying. I mean, it's as ever. There's our problem with you know, these neoclassical plays is, you know, they're big walls of speech. There's a lot of text, but that you know, I thought worked very, very well. How was it to perform, or to view for that matter? Rachael, I'll go to.
Oh, no, I was going to say. A production could play it one of two ways: that he's being this emotional flatterer by misery loves company type thing, or he means it in the way that he wants to dissuade the king, and if he means to dissuade the king with that speech, that the king has just ignored this amazing piece of emotional experience and brushed it over to be like, oh, hey, no, let's get back to me. Let's talk about me again and my problems, not how your brother and your lover, you murdered one and then the other murdered the other.
Liza, are you ready?
Yeah, I mean, I love doing that speech. It's a gift for an actor. It's very, the diction level is extremely high. It's very poetic, but it's personal enough that you can make it personal.
Because of course you don't really know where it's going. I mean, that's what's, you know, we know it's going to be bad.
Yeah. I mean, at first, I'm cold reading this, and at first I was unclear whether it wasn't the brother that had murdered the girl, but apparently it was not. Someone else had murdered the girl, and he thought he was going to attack the murderer, but it was really dark, so he stabbed someone who he thought was the murderer, and it was in fact his brother, and now he doesn't have either his intended wife or his brother, and If this is Greek,
and even worse, the murderer killed himself. He didn't even get the chance to enact revenge either.
Yeah, God damn it, when people are but so in Greek terms, and I wonder if we'll see a little of this in the future, if you kill a family member, you are cursed. If you kill a family member, the Furies come for you. That also applies if you kill a defenseless guest in your house and a couple other circumstances, but generally, if you kill a family member, you get pursued by the Furies and they drive you mad.
Yeah, and I don't know if it's clear, but I think it's in the argument that he is an outcast from his own society, so that's why he's here with Croesus. So
Wait, he's an outcast, so he gets to talk to the king at great length?
Well, I don't know the backstory. Maybe there'll be more detail, but I think that's the situation. So he is himself in exile after that. So he's talking his tragic backstory. I think that's the logic there. I could be wrong on that. And of course, Adrastus does the useful thing of just reminding Croesus. So back to Attis, just in case you'd forgotten. Should we go back to the dream? It's quite useful at that point, actually. In fact, that's probably the point we'll start next session on, just before where we're supposed to begin, just to remind everyone of the situation at hand. When we return next time. Okay, final thoughts from the room then. I'll start queuing that up. We've got a third of the way into the play. A lot of that was sort of, shall we say, thematic throat clearing. I really enjoyed this session. I think there's a lot of questions about what's the best medium, what's the best presentational style for something like this, which is very if we've got a sliding scale of neoclassical, very wordy closet type drama, this is very much on that one end. But there's just so much good stuff in here, actually, that it's a real really that's fired my thinking hat. I'm going to put my thinking hat on about this one, because certainly there's bits I'd like to nick. I'd really quite like to do the Adrastus thing as a separate random short. I think that would work really nicely. And I quite like the completeness of the whole Solon Croesus opening 2 acts. I think there's something really nice about that. I don't know how that's going to link into the rest of the play. Beyond thematically, I'm quite interested in what structurally is going on with the play as well. And whether that's sort of excessive in terms of weight and things. I'm just thinking aloud. Final thoughts from the room about what we're hoping for, what we're thinking it will turn into, and what we might do with it. Rachael, any final thoughts?
I loved that opening was really interesting to me. Because it's a little weird. And by weird, I don't mean it's bad. I just mean it does its own thing. And I don't think it's trying to fit in the formula of the way other people write. And then I think we kind of go into a little bit of we go into these dialogues, even if they're these long speeches, it's kind of like a philosophical dialogue. And then that last scene we did is really moving. But I think there's a lot of sort of subtlety here, like one scene is meant to foil another, not just characters as foils, but one scene as a foil to another. And I think there's a lot of subtlety and there's a lot of quietude in what you said about a closet drama, that it's something that lends itself well to that. And I think I'd actually, if not just staging, I'd like to see maybe like this as some parts of this as a short film or something, like one day. I think it would lend itself quite nicely because it has this this intimacy to it, because it is so philosophical as being these sort of quiet, private conversations of really digging into the interior of another person's mind or another person's heart.
Yeah, you do get a sense of interiority, even though that there are debatey things and the formal structures to it, but actually that there is something at stake for these people when they're doing it, and you don't always get that. Sometimes you have to force that a little. So it's nice that that's there. Greg, any final thoughts from you? You weren't a fan of Solon, but could you have fun with him?
I think you could. I love the speeches. Don't get me wrong. It's not. He's a fabulous part. And actually, when I first went through this play and thought, oh, cripes, there's a lot of speech. And there's a lot of speech. There's a lot of speech over and over. I thought, but actually, they're quite fast. You find the rhythm when you sort of just get picked up and go with it. A really interesting play. I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes tomorrow. I just find it funny that two characters that we've invested so much time in tonight just don't appear again.
Well, we do get to see Adrastus again, so and obviously Croesus will return. It's not repetitious. It's not getting trapped in its own rhythm. It's the verse is doing a lot of interesting work. Liza, final thoughts from you or Chairman Cat?
Well, my final thoughts are okay. This play, especially the last scene we did, the Croesus Adrastus scene, I'm on the hook now. I'm in, and I care what happens. So it better not disappoint me, or else I'll leave William Alexander. I'll tweet disdainfully about him. I'll start some beef or something. So I care what happens, and I might write fan fiction about it. So in that sense, it's done what it was designed to do. It made me care what happens. Yes, good suggestion, Rachael, in chat. I will dox Sir William Alexander, the Earl of Stirling, was it?
I think it was Stirling, yes.
Yeah, I'm going to tell the world what castle he lives in, and people will turn up to his castle and take unflattering photos of him, or this got away from me a little bit.
Yeah.
But like a lot of neoclassical plays, what's missing is humor. What's missing is a Han Solo, or even a Wookiee. Does a Scottish Earl acknowledge the existence of clowns? We'll see, I guess.
Yes, well, we've got this the rest of this play and three more, but so far it's within its context a nice little thumbs up so far.
Milo has thoughts too.
Oh, excellent! That's what.
That's his
I'll
thoughts.
make a note. I'll make a note on that. It's important to get all opinions.
Oh, very, very important.
Any other thoughts before we close the session? Well, we will be returning to Croesus. We've just started on Act 3. We're going to have all sorts of additional characters coming in, and we'll see what the flow of the narrative is going to be doing when we return with mostly the same team, with some variations next time, and we'll find out what's going to go on. All that remains is to thank all the wonderful readers for all your wonderful reading. Thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye. All things decay.